I'm going to start off with a poem that is not my own. It's a poem written by one of my favorite poets, Robert Hayden. And I want to read this poem in dedication to all the people who have been pushing for something different this year. What I mean by that is during the last few months when we had the protests, the global protests, calling attention to the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, I was saddened, as I often am in this country, but I was also encouraged by the number and the force of the people who are out there on the streets, on the front lines, really pushing for something better. And those of you who will be out there on November 3rd pushing for something better, I want to read this in dedication to you. The poem itself is dedicated to the abolitionist Robert Hayden. And just so you know, the abolitionist Frederick Douglass, and it's written by Robert Hayden. Frederick Douglass. When it is finally ours, this freedom, this liberty, this beautiful and terrible thing, needful to man as air, usable as earth, when it belongs at last to all, when it is truly instinct, brain matter, diastole, systole, reflex action, when it is finally one, when it is more than the gaudy mumbo jumbo of politicians, this man, this Douglass, this former slave, this Negro beaten to his knees, exiled, visioning a world where none is lonely, none hunted, alien. This man, superb in love and logic, this man shall be remembered. Oh, not with statues' rhetoric, not with legends and poems and wreaths of bronze alone, but with the lives grown out of his life, the lives fleshing his dream of the beautiful, needful thing. And that's you guys, the lives grown out of his life, the lives fleshing his dream of the beautiful, needful thing. All right. So now it's all downhill from here because I'm only reading my own poems. I'll start with the first poem in the last book, and it's called On Confessionalism. And I won't say too much to introduce the poem. Maybe you guys might have some questions after about it. On Confessionalism. Not sleepwalking, but waking still, with my hand on a gun, and the gun in a mouth, and the mouth on the face of a man on his knees. Autumn of '89, and I'm standing in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cot, and staring down at this man, then up into the mug of an old woman staring, watering the single sad flower to the left of her stoop, the flower also staring. My engine idling behind me, a slow moaning bass line and the bark of a dead rapper nudging me on, all to say someone's brokenhearted. And this man with the gun in his mouth, this man who, like me, is really little more than a boy, may or may not have something to do with it, may or may not have said a thing or two, betrayed a secret, say, that walked my love away. And why not say it? She adored me, and I, her, more than anyone, anything in life up to then and then still for 2 decades after, and therefore went for broke. Blacked out and woke, having gutted my piggy and pawned all my gold to buy what a homeboy said was a Beretta. Blacked out and woke, my hand on a gun, the gun in a mouth, a man who was really a boy on his knees. And because I loved the girl, I actually paused before I pulled the trigger. Once, twice, 3 times, then panicked not just because the gun jammed, but because what if it hadn't? Because who did I almost become there that afternoon in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cocked with the sad flowers staring? Because I knew the girl I loved, no matter how this all played out, would never have me back. Day of damaged ammo or grime that clogged the chamber. Day of faulty rods or springs come loose in my fist. Day nobody died. So why not hallelujah, say amen or thank you? My mother sang for years of God, babes, and fools. My father, lymph node masses fading from his x-rays, said surviving one thing means another comes and kills you. He's dead, and so I trust him. Dead, and so I'd wonder years about the work I left undone. Boy on his knees, a man now, risen, and likely plotting his long way back to me. Fuck it. I took my tool like the movie gangsters do and jumped back in my bucket. Cold enough day to make a young man weep. Afternoon when everything or nothing changed forever. The dead rapper grunted, the bass line faded, my spirits whispered something from the trees. I left, then lost the pistol in a storm drain. Somewhere between that life and this. Left the pistol in a storm drain, but never got around to wiping away the prints. All right. I'm still getting used to these Zoom readings, but I'm imagining you guys are like just applauding raucously and writhing in ecstasy behind the magic in the words. Like you're just so impressed with the poetry, you can't contain yourselves. What else should I read? Yeah, I'll read this one. So, I'll switch books. Read from this one. So, as some of you know, and some of you are probably saddened by the fact that the Los Angeles Lakers won their 17th World Championship on Sunday. It's been a long time, but we got it done. And that was special to me because when I was growing up, I wanted to be a Laker. And a lot of us did, who I grew up with. None of us made it to become Lakers, various reasons. Some of us went on to other careers. Some of us didn't get to choose any careers. Yeah. So I wrote this poem not for the Lakers, but for my friends who dreamed. And it's called Practicing Fadeaways. On a deserted playground in late day sun, my palms dusted black, dribbling a worn leather ball behind my back, this loneliness echoes from the handball courts nearby. Nearly all the markings, free throw lane, sideline, center circle, rubbed to nothing. A crack in the earth cuts across the schoolyard, jagged as a scar on a choir boy's cheek. 20 years ago, 30 years ago now, 30 years ago, I ran this very court with 9 other wannabe ballers. We'd steal through peeled chain links or hop the gate to get here, our blacktop Eden. One boy, who had a funny pigeon-toed set shot and a voice full of church bells, sang spirituals every time he made a basket. The other boys humming along, laughing, high fives flying down the court. And a boy we called the Sandman, for how he put you to sleep with his shoulder faker drop step, over 6 feet tall in the 10th grade, smooth talker with an itch for older guys' girlfriends. One Sunday morning, they found him stabbed to death outside the Motel 6. Pockets untouched, bills folded neatly against his beautiful, cooling thigh. And downtown Ricky Brown, whose family headed west when he was 2, but still called himself a New Yorker, who never pulled from less than 30 feet out and could bank shots blindfolded. He went to Grambling, drove himself crazy with conspiracy theories and liquor, was last seen roaming the French Quarter, shoeless, babbling about the Illuminati's 666 ways to enslave the populace. At 16, I discovered Venice Beach with its 1,000 bodybuilders, roller skates, and red thong bikinis. I would stand on the sidelines and watch the local ball players, leaping and hollering quicksilver giants, run and gun, already grown into their man bodies, funkadelic rising from a boombox in the sand. Now, all I hear are chain nets chiming as I sink one fade away after another, the backboard, the pole, throwing a long shadow across the cracked black asphalt. What the nets want must be this caress, this stillness stretching along every avenue, over high school gymnasiums and deserted playgrounds, and the ambulance drivers drifting into naps back at the station house. What the boys who ran these courts wanted was a lob pass high enough to pull them into the sky, something they could catch in both hands and hang from, long enough for someone to snap a photograph, to hold them there, skybound, risen. That poem's pretty good. It's from my old book, came out 10 years ago. I don't really read it that often, but I go back to it and yeah, it still holds up. It still holds up. Back to this book. Let's see. On the heels of that, I'm gonna read another poem dedicated to myself, my younger self, and my friends who were young with me. This poem, in this book, there are various poems, as some of you who've been studying the book know, that take as their title certain poetic terms, right? There's on metaphor, on prosody, on confessionalism, which was the first poem I read. This was called On Negative Capability. Negative capability is a term that was coined by the English poet John Keats. And in a letter to his brother, he was talking about some discoveries he was making as a poet in his reading and as his writing, in his writing. And one of the things he came upon was this realization of what it really takes to become a good writer, or a great artist rather. And it's what he called negative capability, which he described as, or defined as, the ability to exist in uncertainties and mysteries without any irritable reaching after fact or reason. What does that mean? It means the ability to be okay with the unknown, right? To write from and toward a place of the unknown, and to be open to surprises, yeah? And I take to that both as an ars poetica, but also as a way to live, right? We don't know what's going to happen next anyway. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, 5 minutes from now. So the best thing to do is to be in the moment and to be open to whatever life brings you. I think when I was a kid or a young person, a young adult even, some of us took that to its extreme. And in doing so, we put ourselves in harm's way very often. This poem is called On Negative Capability. White walls, mud flaps, late night howling down a dark dirt road. Headlights kill and so the world gone black, but for the two blunts lit, illuminating JoJo's fake gold grin, one girl each screaming from the back seat. We raced the red moon, raw dogged the stars, his mama's car, my daddy's gun, public enemy number one. 17 and simple, we wanna be hard rocks through rude boy fingers and gang signs at the sky. Blinded by the hot smoke rising like the sirens in the subwoofers, blinded by the crotch funk rising from all our eager selves, we mashed in perfect murk, a city block's length, at least toward God knows what, when, or why. Neither Jojo nor I, nor our two dates screaming had a clue or even care what the black ahead held. Come road, come night, come blackness and the colds, come havoc, come mayhem, come down God and see us, come bloodshot moon running alongside the ride as if to warn us away from, as if to run us straight into some jagged tooth and jackal-throated roadside ditch. When Jojo gunned the gas, we pushed into that night like a nest of sleeping jaybirds, shaken loose and plunging. Between our screams, a hush so heavy we could almost hear what was waiting in the dark. All right. You guys doing okay? Yeah, we're doing good. Let's see. Professor Dabrowski, how much time do I have left? Oh, no, Professor Dabrowski. All right. I'll read a couple more just to, don't want to go over because I know you guys are going to have questions as well. We got a little bit of a late start. Let's see. I think I'll go back to the first book again. So, any of you, well, can't ask you guys, you won't be able to answer, but there's a movie that came out in 1976 called, or I saw it in 76, I think it came out a couple years before actually. It was called Enter the Dragon. And it's Bruce Lee's most famous movie. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. In that movie, there's a scene that when I was a child was the most memorable scene to me. Bruce Lee was not in that scene though. There was another martial artist by the name of Jim Kelly. And he was an African-American martial artist, a black belt. And for a lot of us, was a role model. Right? He was young, had a really beautiful, perfectly round afro, and was handsome. You know, he was one of the first figures, at least, you know, during my lifetime, one of the first action heroes that we saw on screen. And in this movie, there's a scene where I think he's either walking down the street or he's driving, I can't remember which, but he gets accosted, I think he's driving, and he gets pulled over. An officer asks him to step out of the car, and the officers were actually, not to give away too much of the movie, it's not a huge plot point, but the officers were hired by, I think, a local henchman or something, if I'm remembering correctly, to do damage to this guy, Jim Kelly. And so they surround him, I think like 30 cops, and he, because he's a karate man, kicks all their asses, and then jumps into their squad car, one of the squad cars, and drives off. And I remember being a kid and thinking that was so cool. That's what this poem actually starts off in that moment. And it's called Enter the Dragon. For me, the movie starts with a black man leaping into an orbit of badges, tiny moons catching the sheen of his perfect black afro, art kicks, karate chops, and 30 cops on their backs. It starts with a swagger, the cool lean into the leather front seat of the black and white he takes off in. Deep hallelujahs of moviegoers drown out the wah-wah guitar, salt and butter high fives, right on, brother. And daddy, glowing so bright, he can light the screen all by himself. This is how it goes down. Friday night, and my father drives us home from the late show. Two heroes Cadillacing across King Boulevard. In the car's dark cab, we jab and clutch Jim Kelly and Bruce Lee with popcorn breath and almost miss the lights flashing in the cracked side mirror. Now, I know what's under the seat, but when the uniforms approach from the rear quarter panel, when the fat one leans so far into my father's window, I can smell his long day's work. When my father, this John Henry of a man, hides his hammer, doesn't buck, tucks away his baritone, license and registration shaking as if showing a bathroom pass to a grade school principal. I learn the difference between cinema and city, between the movie house cheers of old men and the silence that gets us home. All right.
I'm sorry, I wanted to apologize. You were asking about time earlier, and it was a tech issue was just coming up. But anyway, just yeah, you've got a few more minutes, and that would be fantastic. Like 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so. That would be
okay, perfect. Thank you.
It is wonderful. It's going great. But,
okay, thanks.
it's hard when we can't have like the audience responding. It's just a little bit anyway frustrating that way. But I just wanted to tell you, fantastic. So,
oh, thank you, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Of course. So let's see. I'll read two more poems then. One a little longer and one shorter. Actually, one poem, a longer poem. And this one, yeah, I'll end with this. Dolores, maybe. I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I slept once in a field beyond the riverbank, a flock of nightjars watching over me. That was the summer a farmer found his daughter hanging in the hayloft and wished for the first time he had not touched her so. I wish I could say we were close, the girl and I mean, but only knew her to wave hello and walked her once halfway up the road before turning finally into my grandmother's yard. This was Ontario, California, 1983, which is to say there was no river, and I wouldn't know a nightjar if it bit me. But the girl was real, and the day they found her, that was real. And the dress she wore, same as on our walk, periwinkle she called it. I called it blue, blue with bright yellow flowers all over. The dress and the flowers, they too were real. And on our walk, I remember we cut through the rail yard and came upon a dead coyote lying near the tracks, a frail and dusty heap of regret. He was companion to no one. Stone still, staring, our shadows stretched long and covering the animal. She told me something I want to say about loneliness, something I've since forgotten, the way I've forgotten, though I can see her face as if she were standing right here, her very name. Let's call her Dolores, from dolor, Spanish for anguish. And whatever the sky, however lovely that afternoon, I remember mostly the wind, how a breeze unraveled what was left of a braid. And when I tried to brush from Dolores's brow a few loose strands, how she flinched, how she ran the rest of the way home, how I never saw her after that, except when they carried her from the barn. Her periwinkle dress, her blue legs and arms, and the fields ablaze with daisies. I spent the rest of that summer in the rail yard with my dead coyote, watching trains loaded and leaving. All summer long, I'd pelt him with stones. All summer long, I'd use the stones to spell the girl's name, Dolores, maybe, in the dirt. All summer long, fire ants crawled over and between each letter. Her name now, its own small town. A season of heat and heavy rains washed my coyote to nothing, only teeth and a few stubborn bones that refused finally to go down. Weeks into autumn, someone found the father hanged from the same groaning tie beams, the hayloft black with bottleflies. But that was 1983, Ontario, California, which is to say the bottleflies are dead, so too the ants, and neither field nor barn is where I left it. I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I gathered a handful of my coyote's bones, his teeth, and strung them all on fishing wire, a talisman to ward off anguish, a talisman I hold out to you now. Please come closer, take this from my hand.